What's up guys, Intellitech Mobile here, and this will be the first console review on this channel. And if you watched the recent unboxing, you'll know exactly what this is, or if you're just looking at the title or looking at what you see right in front of you. This is the PlayStation 3, but more specifically, it's not just any PlayStation 3, because this review is not covering the PlayStation 3 as a general platform. It's covering the specific final piece of hardware. Oh, hi Rika. Okay. It's covering the final piece of hardware that was released by Sony for the PlayStation 3, which is what has been dubbed the PlayStation 3 Super Slim. And this console is exactly 10 years old. Originally releasing in 2012, this is the final edition of the PlayStation 3. And I recently purchased this on eBay. I just realized my toaster strudels are in the frame. So I purchased this on eBay, but unfortunately it's going to have to go back because of one flaw that these particular machines are known for. And it's, yeah. So one problem with the PS3 Super Slim that you're going to notice right off the bat with most of these is that both of these glossy front and back panels are very fragile. They're held on with only a few thin plastic clips. Then this particular one just kind of fell right off right whenever I unboxed it. And trying to keep this on is a bit of a pain, because even though it feels like it kind of goes back in, it doesn't really click, and it just kind of sits loosely. And the problem is that because of the way that this disc tray is designed, like you can see, just me going to push the button caused this to pop off. So that's the worst part about the PS3 Super Slim. Usually it's the back panel that pops up, but strangely enough, this one's on here just fine. So if you get one of these in really good condition and the person never messed with either of these, then it's probably not a problem. But if you have one that's been beat up or one that's covered in scratches where there's a lot of wear on it, which is probably going to be the case because usually, and this isn't a hard and fast rule, but usually final iterations of previous gen consoles are something that a lot of kids will get because, you know, the parents will want to get them a game console because they've been good, but they don't want to get them the new console that just came out, so they want to save some money and get the previous one. That's kind of a trend that I've noticed a lot, at least back whenever I was growing up. So a lot of kids ended up with this PS3. I believe one of my best friends, in fact, this was the model PS3 that he had, but I could be wrong. So either way, these little sections are prone to breaking off on this model, and that's the worst part about this model. Is there are some advantages and disadvantages to this design over the previous generation PS3s. The most obvious difference is that. So instead of a slot loading disc tray where you slide your Blu-ray or your optical media into the front of the console, like in the PS3 Slim, normal Slim, and of course every PlayStation, Xbox console that's come out since the PS4 and Xbox One, then this is the biggest difference. So, similar to the Wii Mini and similar to the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1 Slim, this particular design has a door that moves out of the way and allows you to physically drop in the disc. So if you're wanting to play a game, there's two ways you can open it. First, you can grab this door, and it just fell off just from me touching it. Okay, so the first thing you can do is you can just grab this door and move it, or you, and the feet are kind of messed up on this one, or you can press this little eject button right here, which literally just activates a switch that moves this out of the way. Now, no matter which way you open it, there's only one way to close it. You have to grab this lip right here and push it until it clicks, and it's a little tricky. While I do like this manual loading system because it obviously has less mechanical moving parts, so in theory, if you're a collector and you want to keep your PS3 working for the longest of time, this theoretically is the best model. The problem is that the actual gears on this don't have the most tight tolerances. You can tell this moves very freely. So a lot of times these doors will get stuck, and because of the fact that you have access to the laser right there, these can break. So you would think that it's more obviously beneficial to have this because it's more mechanical and less technological. That's not the right word, but there's less motors, there's less drives, it's a lot more mechanical and basic. You would think that that'd be better, but unfortunately the way that they did it in this model, particularly with this slide load mechanism and the way they implemented it, just kind of makes this whole thing a little bit more complicated than the PS2 Slim or the Wii Mini or similar final iteration consoles. So while it is kind of cool that it's a slide load instead of a flip top, like a lot of these iterations usually are, unfortunately, the way that they implemented it on this model means that the gears are very likely to wear out on these. I've seen that happen quite a lot with these. And while there is the advantage of this platform in general, like the fact that you can put in and remove a disc even when the console is off, that's a great feature. You don't have to use any sort of force ejection mechanism. Unfortunately, this whole thing is very cheap. So if there was a version of this that had much better build quality, where this entire mechanism was designed a lot better and was a little bit more resistant to wear, then I feel like this would obviously be the best PS3 model, assuming you don't care about PS2 backwards compatibility, which you obviously don't get on this unit. You don't get any PS2 compatibility, but you do get PS1 compatibility. Yes, every single PlayStation 3 model can play PS1 games, regardless of what model it is. So not only can you play your PlayStation 3 collection, but you can also play your PlayStation 1 collection in this. So you can't play PS2 on this model. You would have to get a fat, like with 4 USB ports in order to get that functionality. But hey, you do still have PS1, so that's cool. And of course, it's a PlayStation 3, so you get Blu-ray, you get DVD, you get all that stuff. You don't get HD DVD, of course. You don't get Laserdisc, of course. But you do get, you know, what you'd expect for a PS3. So this could be a pretty cost-effective Blu-ray player, but as it is, you can get actual standalone Blu-ray players brand new for more than you would be able to get one of these used. So that's not really a selling point anymore, but it was back in the day. So the way that you load this, in case it wasn't obvious before, is that you open this tray in some fashion. I usually just manually do it. Drop in the disc, press it down, and then you push this door shut. Now, a lot of people have expressed issues with shutting this by grabbing it and then essentially them not having enough friction and that causing it to slide like this. That's why I personally just take my fingernail and slide it underneath his lip to push it. Now, this mechanism can also work when it's... We're just going to ignore that. So this mechanism does also work when the console is upright, and this console actually stands upright a little bit more stably, that's not a word, than the standard PS3 Slim, primarily because it's actually flat on one side. I don't understand why Sony insists on going with this like weird like notch design, but this isn't as stable as a fat PS3, of course, but it's a little bit more stable than a Slim. But of course Sony expects you to have a stand that of course you can't find anymore for these. But when you press the eject button when it's standing up, it actually falls really slowly, which is kind of cool. But of course, when you have it standing up, getting to the disc is a little bit more awkward, and putting it in is fairly simple enough. But then closing this gets to be a little bit awkward. So I usually will just slide my finger underneath and just push it up. But pushing it up can also cause it to fall over like that. So you got to be a little bit careful with it. So now I got to find that piece and put it back on. And I'm going to sneeze real quick. So we're going to eject Black Ops 2, which unfortunately is having some issues on the PS3 right now. But yeah, so on the front we've got 2 USB ports. We don't have 4. We've got our power button right here. That's fairly typical. We've got, if we look on the back, we can hear the creaking plastic of this cheap design. We've got our cooling vents, Ethernet, HDMI, optical, AV multi-out, and power. This uses very, very generic and universal cables, which is really nice. You've got the standard figure 8 power plug that so many consoles and electronic AV equipment uses. You can find these power cords everywhere. You have an internal power supply, so if you pick up one of these for cheap, I honestly recommend buying one of these without the cables, because you probably have one of these figure 8 cables lying around and an HDMI. If you don't, then sure, pay the extra couple bucks. But for me, I have a stash of all of these cables, so I can personally get a deal by buying a console that doesn't come with the power cord, although mine did. So that is nice. If you do find one of these without the cables, then that is one advantage, is that you can pick it up and be confident that you can get it at least powered. It might not work, but you can at least physically turn it on and connect it to your TV. Although that's not really an advantage for this model specifically because the standard PS3 Slim is the same way, and even the fat PS3 is the same way, only in that case it's a 3-prong computer power cord instead of a 2-prong double barrel power cord, but it's still a universal cable. So you also have, like I mentioned, the AV multi-out, so if your TV supports composite, S-video, component, or anything like that, you can get many different connectors out of this machine. You can connect it to literally any TV, which is nice because obviously the newer PS4s and all that have an issue where, since those only use HDMI, not only do you need an adapter to use them on an older TV, but also, I think more importantly, if the HDMI port goes bad, which Sony consoles are kind of prone to doing, if your HDMI console goes bad on your PS4, you're kind of effed. Same thing with your PS5, but nobody owns one, so there's no point in mentioning that. But on this, if you break your HDMI port, you can at least use component and still get HD out of it, so that's kind of cool. And when you bought this, it only came with composite cables, which is kind of dumb, but hey, at least you got a cable for when you want to plug your PS1 into your CRT. But of course, you don't need to do that since this plays PS1. So, now, overall, do I recommend this machine in 2022, 10 years after its release? Honestly, no. And the biggest reason is, well, okay, now it's staying on, but this little thing. So this little thing that keeps breaking off every time okay, now it's starting to stay on. But these little things that keep popping off and breaking off on these units is very annoying. And also, this actual slide load mechanism is just, it's not as nice as the slot loading on the Fat or the Slim. Now, I may be biased because when it comes to consoles, I always prefer the Fat versions just because that's like the original intent of the look of the console, with the only possible exception maybe being the PS5 because of the size of this coffee table. But this particular design, because of the way it's designed, when you put a disc in, not only is it much louder because you only have this little piece of plastic guarding it, but every time that I eject this, the disc is still spinning when I eject it because there's no way to eject it inside the PlayStation UI. So the only way I can eject it is by physically pushing the button or opening this door, and of course that causes the disc to grind to a halt, and I'm kind of worried that's going to scratch my discs over time. Now granted, these are Blu-rays, so you can literally slide these on concrete before they get scratched, but it's still not the best look in the world whenever it is still spinning when you open the disc. If you remember the early Xbox 360s, the ones with the very early drives that would scratch discs, that was one factor that you could witness of those drives and kind of tell that yours was a bad drive, was whenever you would open the drive and the tray would pop out and the disc would still be spinning onto the plastic tray. So it doesn't give me the best confidence that this machine will be nice to my discs over time, given the fact that the disc will still spin when the machine is turned on. So that's not great. So while inserting a disc and removing it is fairly easy enough, all of that with the way that this is designed just doesn't feel like it was pulled off very well. And a common complaint that I found back whenever these machines were still in the market and relevant is that this machine is obviously way more of a step down in terms of build quality and durability from the PS3 Slim than the Xbox 360E was to the S. This machine was clearly designed to be the cheap, cost-cutting console, especially with the PS4 announcement at the time right around the corner. So this particular model, while there are a ton of them out there because the PS3 got a pretty decent boost in its last bit of life before the PS4 came out, probably due to The Last of Us, then yeah, there are a lot of these out there. So hopefully, because this is the newest PS3, you can hopefully still find one of these in good condition. And if you find one of these in person and you can test it and make sure that all this stuff works and that none of this stuff is broken and you get a good deal on it, then I'd say you could certainly go for it. But for me personally, especially if I'm buying online, I'd prefer to grab a Fat or a Slim, mainly because of the issues with this design. So really, my recommendation of this really depends on where you buy it. So if you're buying one in person and you're getting it for maybe $80 or less, And of course, you could add a couple bucks to that depending on how big the hard drive is in your unit. And I did forget to touch on that. There's a hard drive right underneath here. There's a way to remove it, but I forgot how to do it. Actually, I think it's on this side. I believe this pops off. Oh, okay. There's a way to get one of these sides off and access the hard drive. This particular one is the 12 gigabyte model, which is useless. But when you get the 12 gigabyte model, if you do decide to get that and just add a hard drive later, you actually can add a hard drive to the PS3 very easily. You can just add any standard laptop hard drive, or you can even install an SSD in it and get better performance. So if you buy one with a hard drive that's not big enough for your liking, this model usually came in 12 gigabytes, 250, or 320 or 500 to my knowledge. There might be some others. The Fat and the Slims came in a bunch of other sizes, but if you find that the hard drive isn't big enough, then you can buy any standard laptop hard drive, slap it on the side of it, and get more storage. Although, depending on the model, it might even be every PS3, but I think the 12 gig might be an exception since it has flash storage. But at least all the hard drive models that are hard drived out of the box, you do need to reinstall the PS3's firmware in order to do that, and that's fairly easy to do. At some point I might do a tutorial on how to do that whenever I get one of these that I actually want to keep. But the disadvantage if you get the 12 gigabyte variant is that while you can add a hard drive, the 12 gigabytes usually don't come with the hard drive caddy, so you have to buy the actual holster that holds the hard drive. But the good news is that as of right now, those caddies are all over eBay, and they're like $10. So, and they come with all the screws and everything. So if the hard drive caddy is missing in your PS3, that shouldn't be too big of a deal, because as of right now, you can find the caddies all over the place. So you don't have to feel worried about that. Just hope that you saved enough money to justify buying another hard drive and buying the $10 adapter. Or not adapter, but hard drive caddy. So, yeah, overall, I personally don't recommend the PS3 Super Slim, but if you can get a really good deal on it, and you can test it and make sure that there's nothing physically or mechanically broken with it, then I would say go for it. In my case, I bought it on eBay. I got it for only $50, although with taxes and shipping, it worked out to $69. So, in my case, I would have been happy to keep it were it not for this piece breaking off. But had this not had this issue, then $50 is a great deal on a PlayStation 3, even one with no storage in it, or barely any, because 12 gigabytes is nothing. So, if you can find one of these for around that price, or even a couple bucks more with a decent-sized hard drive in it, then this probably is the cheapest PS3 you can get right now, because nobody wants them. So if you're willing to deal with the worst build quality, then go for it. But for me personally, like I mentioned, I'd rather spend the extra couple bucks and get a fat PS3, or maybe even a Slim, although I personally prefer the fats. So if you find one of these for a good price, then certainly go for it. But otherwise, there are better PS3 models out there. But again, there's advantages and disadvantages to both. The build quality on it is less, but there's less mechanical stuff to wear out. So that's pretty much your decision. Do you prefer this slide load mechanism, or do you prefer the slot loading mechanism? That will be your biggest determinants at which model you pick. As when you compare this to the Slim, it's the same size this way. The Slim is just a little bit longer this way. And of course, the Fat's bigger in every direction. But remember, this one, you're going to need a little bit more vertical space in your entertainment center so that way you can have access to this mechanism, whereas the Slim, you don't need that. So in some ways, this actually isn't that much more compact than the Slim, but it still technically is, and my camera keeps autofocusing for some reason. So anyways, this was Intellitech Mobile. Oh, I forgot to mention the controller. So most of these will come with a controller. Again, this is not a general PS3 review. This is focusing on this specific model. But if you do get a controller with your PS3, note that it uses a mini USB cable, not a micro. But those are still easy enough to find, and it's actually a better connector anyways. So that is that. So the controllers on this are the same for every PS3, except obviously this is a newer PS3, so you're going to have a DualShock 3. And not just a 6-axis controller. If you buy one of these secondhand, it might come with a 6-axis or even a third-party controller, of which there is many. So keep that in mind. You know, since obviously these aren't new anymore, you're not guaranteed to get a brand new controller. In fact, mine didn't even come with a controller, but that's okay because I have 3 PS3 controllers. This one's by far the worst. it doesn't power on, but hey, it probably just needs a battery. So yeah, this was Intellitech Mobile signing out with my full in-depth review of the super slim PlayStation 3. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Sorry if I repeated myself a little bit, because I think the fact that I kept repeating myself clearly says that I'm a little bit torn about this unit. I personally don't like it. Obviously, this one particular one is going back, but hey, it's up to your preference as far as which PS3 you want, but hopefully I mentioned everything there is to know about this specific unit, so that way you can make an informed decision about which PS3 you want to buy, at least if you've already decided that you want to buy a PS3, which in my opinion, you should. Right now is a great time to get into the PS3 and the Xbox 360, and of course I'll be doing plenty of Xbox 360 videos, as well as videos on other consoles on this channel, Intellitech Mobile. So, this was Intellitech Mobile signing out. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. I already said that. I'll see you guys in the next video. I hope you all have a good one. Peace. And let me know your experience with this model PS3 in the comments, and just any PS3 in general. So, let me know what you guys want me to review next. I haven't unlocked community posts yet on this channel, so if you want me to review one of my other consoles, or if you have a request for a console you want to see me review, or just anything, then drop it in the comments below, and I'll gladly consider your request. Alright, have a good one. Peace.